Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad that you're all able to join us today for our discussion about student services as part of this next Ask Set Anything series. Great to see you all. My name is Todd Gilchrist. I'm the Vice President of University Services and Finance here at the University of Alberta. I'm also the SET sponsor, excuse me, and SET sponsor and chair of the Service Excellence Steering Committee. I'd like to first begin with our treaty acknowledgement today. University of Alberta acknowledges that we are located on Treaty 6 territory and respects the histories, languages, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. Today is a little bit different, excuse me, from our past Ask Set Anything events. Unlike other sessions that have focused on administrative areas such as HR, finance, IT, and some of the others, today's session is really going to be about the vision and future of student services at the university. And as such, I'll be handing over the moderating duties, which I usually fulfill, for today's session over to Dr. Stephen Dew, our Provost and Vice President Academic. Steve is leading this exciting new vision for the future of student services, and we'll look forward to hearing what he and the team have to share with us today. We do want to spend as much time as possible answering your questions, so we'll get started. I'd like to start by introducing our panel today. As I mentioned, we have Dr. Dew with us, Provost and Vice President Academic. We have with us today Barbara Billingsley. Barbara is our Dean, Faculty of Law, and our academic sponsor of the Student Services Workstream. We have Melissa Padfield with us today. Melissa is our Vice Provost and University Registrar and Administrative sponsor and initiative lead of the Student Services Workstream. We have Dr. Brooke Milne with us today. Brooke is our Vice President and Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research. We have Dr. Helen Valley-Anatos. Helen is our Acting Vice Provost and Dean of Students. We have Dr. Shen Huang, Vice Provost and Associate Vice President, University of Alberta International. Julie Naylor. Julie is our College General Manager in the College of Natural and Applied Sciences. A consistent couple of faces in all of our Ask Set Anythings. We have Rob Monroe. Rob is our executive lead of the Service Excellence Transformation. And finally, Brian Stewart. Brian is our program director with the Service Excellence Transformation Program. So I will end my comments there. I'll ask Steve to make some opening remarks, and then we'll move right into the first question. Steve, over to you.
Thanks, Todd, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. First off, I do want to acknowledge the hard work that all staff in student services and student support are doing. For those unable to attend today or who wish to rewatch, this event is being recorded and will be posted on the UAT website. I'd like to go over the scope of the student services work stream, the progress we've made so far, and the next steps. So Grant, I'll just ask you to move to the next slide. Okay, so the purpose of this whole restructuring in the student services area, number of elements. Obviously, we want to be aligning with our new operating model, but at the root is really to prepare us to be able to accommodate an increase of about 25% in our enrollment over the next 5 years. That's another 10,000 students or so. By realigning the provost offices and their services, we'll be able to improve the student experience and provide an enhanced service culture. Students will be able to access services through simple access points like the Student Services Center, lessening their burden to navigate services across campus. Next slide, please. Thank you. So we have talked to quite a few people in order to help us develop the model that we'll present this afternoon. So this consultation was extensive and was conducted largely in the spring of 2021 around student services, and involved a number of stakeholder groups. So the students told us that they prefer a centralized one-stop service model or navigation point for most student needs, that the most important service is academic advisement, and that the advisor relationship was really valuable, that they prefer to access services through email or in person. They feel there is an unequal access to services. For example, some faculties are able to provide better mental health services than others, and they want a greater level of support in mental health and counseling support. Through interviews with senior leaders in the 18 faculties, we learned that they support centralizing administratively heavy services such as timetabling and scheduling, that they want to be able to share best practices and support at the college level, such as EDI and indigenization of programs. They prefer to maintain relational services and experiential learning within the faculties, and they would like to leverage university level support for services such as education abroad programs. The centralized units consulted included the Registrar's Office, Dean of Students, UAI, Faculty of Grad Studies and Research, Faculty of Extension and Library and Museums. Their feedback included to centralize transactional activities to shared services and keep non-transactional activities in the faculties. To develop a connected network which can promote best practices and support to students. But they would also like to maintain a high level of involvement from colleges and faculties for centralized activities, and support a document clearinghouse to centralize and standardize forms and workflows. So the feedback we received from this consultation really helped inform the development of the student services vision. Next slide, thank you. To achieve our vision, we do have to do some realignment of some functions within the particularly the four central student services units that are shown here. So the Vice Provost for each unit is currently leading a detailed design process in collaboration with the student services workstream to drive improved student experience across all programs at the university. While some student services may be consolidated, the future state vision is to create an effective student services ecosystem that will prepare the university for growth and ensure our services can deliver a consistent and excellent experience for our students. The proposed changes include consolidation and alignment of functions to enhance expertise in these services while bolstering areas where the university is currently under-resourced. So 4 significant changes will occur in student services, in recruitment, registrarial services, and advising. So I'll work through each of those in turn. In student services, we'll be moving education abroad administrative services solely into UAI, which will allow them to streamline processes. The Student Service Center will report to the registrar and use the center's increased capacity and capability to triage, respond, and be the first point of contact for the majority of student inquiries. Student services that are program specific will not move centrally. In the recruitment side, all recruitment, excluding thesis-based masters and PhDs, will move into the registrar's office. Recruitment for course-based master's programs will then have the oversight and specialist resources in a single function that will partner with program-specific recruitment teams. Program-specific recruitment work, including for professional non-direct entry undergraduate programs, will remain in the faculties, and collaboration on service provision will be a priority. Registration, or the registrarial side, registrarial services, will be rebalanced from academic units and FGSR into the registrar's office. This will require a detailed design of staffing structure, systems, and processes, drawing on the knowledge of experts from FGSR, the RO, and the academic units. And this work will be done with consideration of the outcomes of a discovery project currently being developed and delivered by the RO and FGSR. On the advising side, graduate administrative advisory that happens regardless or independent of program or discipline that currently sits within faculties will move into FGSR. FGSR are working on designing that now and will be seeking feedback on the design. Discipline-specific graduate program advising will stay within the faculty department. Last month, the Student Services Service Catalog was approved and released to the university community. This document outlines at a very high level the future of student services across the UAlberta campuses. Please keep in mind this is a living document and you can find it on the Student Services Stream webpage. We are committed to a staged approach to implementing this vision. This will minimize the impact on students and staff and fit within the annual cycle of student delivery. While some transformation will happen over the spring and summer, larger projects like streaming graduate and undergraduate admissions will take up to 2 years. Next slide. The implementation will take place in 4 staggered phases. As the detailed designs are developed and validated, budget approvals for each design will take place. Once budgets have been finalized and approved, job designs and evaluation activities will take place as we prepare for recruitment. Recruitment will be staggered in order of priority to minimize disruption to staff and students. Jobs will be added to the positions opportunities page, or POP, as they are developed, and staff are encouraged to apply for any postings once they're on the careers page. So I want to emphasize that implementation and hiring for new positions will occur in consultation with the Vice Provost to minimize the disruption to students and to staff. This will mean an overall staggered implementation across student services to fit with annual service cycles. The first positions available should be posted in April or May and will continue throughout the summer. So thank you. Go take down the presentation. I would like to move us now into the Q&A part of the event. And I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Lise Gotel, Professor and Associate Chair of Graduate Programs in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies, to ask today's first question. Lise, can I turn this over to you, please?
Thank you, Steve. My question is about how things will be organized for course-based MA degrees that lead to doctoral programs, because these are really common in the social sciences and humanities. So just to give you a picture of that, in the Faculty of Arts, we have course-based masters in the departments of music, art and design, drama, English, philosophy, modern languages and cultural studies, sociology, political science, economics, linguistics, and gender and social justice studies. So students in these programs, including the ones enrolled in my program, the MA in Gender and Social Justice, are awarded shirks. They obtain research training in a mandatory research workshop, and as part of their professor's grants, they complete capstone projects that are assessed by second readers on completion. They frequently go on to do PhDs, and in fact, we encourage the best students to go into course-based masters, because the thinking in most disciplines is you save that intensive, long thesis work for the PhD dissertation. So my question is, how will these course-based programs leading to PhDs be treated under SET? What does it mean that the registrar will now be responsible for recruitment, and what implications will this have for our admissions processes? Because these processes frequently involve professors involved in the recruitment, because the students are being funded out of grants. So I'm a little bit worried that these programs have been misunderstood as part of this process.
Thanks, Lise. I'm going to tag Melissa and Brooke to help answer this question. So Melissa, Brooke, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Stephen. Thanks, Lise, for the question, because I think it really highlights what I think has become a pretty common misconception about what we're talking about when we're focusing on course-based masters. And we know at the U of A, course-based masters is not a one-size-fits-all term, right? And you've certainly highlighted some of those programs that really are more oriented towards streaming students towards a possible research-based PhD future. And what we want to make sure is that we're not disrupting some of the real patterns of recruitment that happen to support those kinds of programs. What we know is there are some other kinds of course-based masters that would really benefit from a more generalized recruitment approach that we could do much more efficiently from having an aggregated recruitment. Now, that doesn't mean we don't talk to the programs that do where these are housed, or the departments where these kinds of more generalized the non-thesis based or non-research streamed course-based masters exist. We'll still be partnering with those program areas. But for ones like your own, the discussion would look a lot different. It wouldn't be so much that we would say, sorry, you can't recruit anymore for those kinds of students. Not at all. The reverse is in fact true. We would want to maintain the kind of recruitment that you're able to do, that professors are able to work through their networks to identify and support students that might be interested in those programs. And where we would help is if you did identify any places where you knew there might be good recruitment opportunity for us to be able to support, right? To get to students that perhaps didn't come through those other channels. But we're not looking to take that over into the central function. What we really want to focus on really are those more taught masters that aren't designed to streamline necessarily into PhD programs. And we know we have a number of those that are being planned or are actually occurring right now. But the ones you identified really aren't within the scope of what we're talking about when we focus on that course-based masters. And we recognize the interplay between the admissions practices and the recruitment that needs to be preserved throughout that. And again, that's not something we're looking to disrupt. What we're really looking to do is take some work on that's actually net new for the university in many ways, which are those truly taught programs at the master's level where we can look to recruit overseas as well as within Canada in a bit more aggregated manner. But that will still include conversation and consultation with the programs.
Brooke, anything to add?
Right. No, I just wanted to reiterate the points that Melissa had noted, that we do understand and appreciate that there is a great deal of variability across what are named course-based master's programs, but recognizing and respecting the fact that there are many programs like the one that you note, Lise, where those programs and the students in them are recognized by Tri-Council. They produce major research papers for which they're eligible for and are very successful in obtaining the CGS awards through SSHRC in particular. I'm thinking of. So I would say that really those points of collaboration where they might exist would really be about supporting units in terms of processing volume per se, so that it's not taking away from or diminishing the very important unit level assessments that happen, particularly as you've described, Lise, where many of these students are applying to PhD programs. So all of those elements would still remain intact, and with the important discipline specific purview of the units assessing those applications for course-based students that are graduating from those programs.
Thanks for the answers, and thanks, Lise, for getting the questions started for us today. I'd like to now open up the session to questions from others. We'll encourage folks to please use your virtual hand, and we'll try and get through as many questions as possible during our time this afternoon. If you are not able to ask a question live or don't feel comfortable doing so, we have added a question form to the chat, and we'll try to get to those questions if we see no hands in the queue. And we have a few questions that have come in early if we run out of questions to respond in live. So I'll go to Jillian as the top of our list.
Thanks, Steve. Hopefully a fairly quick and straightforward question. Based on the slides that we just saw, it looks like there was a missed opportunity for engaging with support staff when there was that survey work done early on. Because like we saw that there was the student side, and then there were the 62 senior faculty leaders, and then the 22 senior central leaders for that one. So as the theme of today is vision and moving forward, I'm wondering if you can commit to meaningful engagement with support staff as we move forward into this next growth and evaluation phase. As I learned through the U of A's own supervisory leadership program, if you help plan the battle, you don't battle the plan. So a commitment to this type of meaningful engagement as we grow and move through this would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, thanks, Jillian. And perhaps a wrong impression was given. We've certainly been talking to many, many people across the entire spectrum of student services, and certainly value that input regardless of from where it comes. Obviously, when you're doing a complete redesign of a processes such as this, you want to be talking to people throughout that spectrum, right from your end client and user, or students, right through to the folks in the frontline delivery, all the way up to all the folks who have the accountability and responsibility for delivering on this. And we have multiple mechanisms in order to make sure that interaction does occur and that input is there. So absolutely interested in hearing from all, frankly, on how we move forward. Denis.
Yes, thank you. My question, actually, I don't know if this is the right time and place to ask this question, but I've asked this question many times and I still don't really have an answer. It's quite concerning to me. What does it mean exactly to be a standalone faculty? Because so far, throughout this process for the last year and a half or so, we've always kind of tried to explain certain particularity that we have at some, like for example, Campus Saint-Jean, and we were told throughout the process, no, don't worry, you're a standalone faculty, this will not affect you, this is not going to make any change to your the way you function and the way you do things. But the reality is that we don't see that. It's you know, what we're told in meetings and what's happening after are two different things, and I don't see any difference by being a standalone faculty. I really would like to know once for all what that means exactly.
Yeah, good question. And I suspect that there are elements of this that we'll continue to refine as we move forward. The intent of the standalone faculty is to ensure that as we contemplate the colleges, that we build a model that is not dependent on the colleges, that the standalone faculties are able to function without that construct, and continue to do the functions that they deliver for their respective stakeholder groups. The reason we did feel that the standalone faculties needed to maintain that independent status is that they do have very unique communities that they work with and serve. And that they have a mission that is highly focused into those communities and not really amenable to finding economies of scale by pulling into a larger unit such as the college. So in terms of student services in particular, the intent here is that when you seek a service as a student rather than a student in program X, that the mechanisms and pieces that are in place within the framework that I've tried to lay out here are ones that you would find your answers, your responses to. But as soon as you start to touch in, my question is very specific to the particular program I'm in, then we need to make sure that we route those services, those requests into a faculty or academic unit that is in a position to be able to respond to their specific needs. And that could be a college in some places. Clearly, in the case of a student coming from Campus Saint-Jean, that's going to be into that faculty and its campus services. Obviously, that brings an additional element, which is, of course, the ability to provide service in French. And that's certainly something that our students will need, expect, and receive, regardless of whether that becomes from a central service provider or into the services that will be provided by the standalone faculty. There will certainly be elements that, as we work through some of the pieces, we'll have some back and forth, but at the end of the day, we've committed that those are units that need to have the ability to function outside of the elements that are in a college. And because each of them has a particular unique aspect that can't be pulled into the center to provide that service. Let's go to Christiane, and hopefully a question that I can hand off to someone else.
Hello, thank you for meeting with us today. I just want to follow up on Jillian's question about the consultation with support staff. I just want to know a little bit more about what that looked like and the reason it wasn't included in the presentation.
Sure. Rob, can I turn to you perhaps for some initial comments, and Melissa probably also has some pieces to add to that.
Yeah, I imagine that Melissa probably can add more to it, but as we've gone through the whole SET program, as we've been redesigning processes and the like, we have made sure that we've had input from all levels of the organization, from all the areas that have the unique knowledge of the different areas and the processes. That some of that work is going to be continuing going forward, so there will be much more opportunity to have involvement as well. Melissa, do you have any further?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about some of the specifics where there was consultation with support staff and different areas of staff. Specifically when we were looking at some of our changes around enrollment management and even in the development of the student service catalog, we tried to rely on different groups that would bring together collections of faculty representatives that were either in the support staff or APO category to be able to get some insights into whether or not we were moving in the right direction. And we also encouraged folks within those forums to connect the information out into the groups that they maybe supervised or worked with. So we did that through a working group structure to come up with things like our enrollment management service partners, our recruitment center of expertise, our transfer admissions work. We also did that through our advisory committee on enrollment management to talk about the student service catalog and to put that out in front of a number of other people and different folks. And so that was some of the venues that we used to talk directly with support staff. And to Rob's point, we are continuing to do that as we identify different areas where we're engaging in process redesign or development, or in areas where we were continuing to evolve what the structures will look like to support students as students through these variety of different service providers.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for the question. I'm going to apologize in advance to our next question asker, because I'm sorry, I'll mess up your name, but just...
Thank you, Stephen. You got it. C'est juste. Merci. And I will follow up on Denise' question, and with regards to your pretty good answer as well. I saw some hope when you said about we quote saying that in terms of student services that you saw some possibilities and you would be giving some possibilities of the student services to function. And we know that the best and stellar possibility to function is we need resources, and the first one being the human resources here. And in terms of Campus Saint-Jean Student Services Center, so what would that be? What would that mean in terms of pretty forward? Would that mean that there is some hope in terms of what we've seen as a loss in HR? Or what would that be if not what would be those possibilities to function?
Yeah, good question. And I'm not sure I'm going to be able to give you all of the pieces you're looking for here. I think that a component of this will depend on what service you're looking for and how it would be delivered. So Dean of Students would be the place that we would expect a student to go to if they needed, let's say, accommodation assistance or mental health supports. If the service is related to, let's say, financial aid, then I expect that you will be off to the registrar, and those two central units would need to be able to provide that service in in French if we're coming from Campus Saint-Jean. But if the question is really about, let's see, I'm in a nursing program that happens to be delivered at Campus Saint-Jean, then primarily then I'm expecting the first point of contact about the questions around that program are going to have to be delivered by Campus Saint-Jean. And so we will have to make sure that there are the resources in place in order to be able to do that. I think that as we've got the elements of the central pieces more firmly nailed down as we roll out the design over the next few months, how all of the individual articulations will occur. But the intent is that the student services catalog is in play, and that allows the overall design through the whole, frankly, administrative services or structure through Campus Saint-Jean. We know we do have to have response to a very significant decrease in our funding, and that is driving all faculties to be reconsidering their structure and their organization. I don't think that each of the faculties, including Campus Saint-Jean, have quite gotten through all the pieces yet, but we do at the end of the day need to make sure that all of our programs are supported and at a level which is commensurate, so that we don't have a particular part of the university that is at a dramatically different level of service than any other part. Melissa, I'm not sure if there's anything that you'd be able to add, but certainly invite you or Rob to contribute to that.
Yeah, I think you covered a lot of it, Steve. I do think one of the opportunities is for us to create, with any of these student service changes, a student service ecosystem that supports all students, regardless of where they're coming from, but does it in a way that's thoughtful to who they are. So students at Campus Saint-Jean have a background that is different than students at Augustana, that is different than students in the Faculty of Science or in the Faculty of Native Studies. And we want to make sure that we're able to serve those students appropriately well. In some cases, as Steve points out, that's going to be at Campus Saint-Jean, right, where they can access program-specific information in a way that's thoughtful to the program that they're taking. In other cases, a consolidation of services that supports Campus Saint-Jean through the Student Service Center on certain elements like financial support, or in elements such as student recruitment, can be very useful, while still understanding that there is a particular nature to be preserved, whether that service happens in the center or happens in the faculty. And the way we do that is to work collaboratively together to figure out what those interconnection points look like and how we do them in a way that supports the student first. And that's what we're looking to do through the broader discussions that are ongoing now, and to make sure that we get it right. But we're also able to find that efficiency, the economy of scale, and a common service experience for all students.
Rob, anything you wanted to contribute?
No, thanks for the opportunity. I think that covers it very well.
Okay, do we have other questions in the Zoom room? Sorry, just getting one here. I think this is coming from our online form. And so the question is, the overall student services vision includes the Student Service Center being the one-stop shop for all students, including graduate students. How does enlarging FGSR, rather than moving some graduate student services to the registrar's office, fit with the overall version when the Students Service Center will just have to refer graduate students over to FGSR? Melissa, I might tag you first, and Brooke might have some additional pieces to add.
For sure. And I think, the first point I'd like to make is that FGSR and the RO are working really closely together to identify which services should be delivered where, but also recognizing that there's a suite of services within FGSR that are very particular to graduate students and will always remain within FGSR to really ensure that grad students are having their needs met appropriately. So it's not so much duplication as parallel tracks. And what we're trying to do is, through working together, identify which pieces of work make sense to transition so that students can get them in one space through the Student Service Center, and which buckets of work will always be better served by being within FGSR and the way it is continuing to evolve. And so it's not so much that what we've said is there's no interrelationship here, but rather we're in the process of defining how to streamline the student experience so that there is the right number of services in the registrar's office and the right services happening in FGSR. And so when Steve referred to this notion of rebalancing, that's what we're doing. So we are in constant communication right now, mapping out processes to determine where and how they should shift, or if in fact they should shift based on what will provide the best experience for students.
Thanks, Melissa. Brooke, anything to add?
No, I think Melissa captured all of the key elements there, and just underscoring the collaborative nature of doing this process mapping and evaluation is really key.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question here from the form, which is, have Augustana students or the Augustana Students Association been consulted? I am going to see if I can punt this one to either Melissa or Rob to help me with, since I wasn't involved in those discussions. Melissa, are you able to help us with that?
So when we did our initial student association consultations, and this would have been back when we were contemplating how the Student Service Center would evolve, we focused on the Students Union and the Graduate Students Association primarily. And then we expanded out to talk to folks like the Aboriginal Students Society and other groups. I'm not sure whether we had a specific conversation, to be honest with you, with the Augustana Student Association, but we have been in a lot of conversation with Augustana and the Student Services area to try and make sure that any of the Student Service Center work that's happening was very cognizant of what needed to be maintained at Augustana campus and how we would manage services appropriately in that way. Rob, I don't know if you have other information about consultation specifically with Augustana Student Services?
I do not. We'll have to, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Melissa. No, I do not. We'll find out if they were specifically consulted.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate the question. I'm not seeing any more in the Zoom room, so I'll pull one off that was submitted in advance. And the question is, what is changing to eliminate the duplication between the RO and FGSR, and in brackets, admissions, student sports, etc. So Melissa, Brooke, I'm going to tag the team of you again.
No problem at all. So let's start with admissions. Brooke and I are engaged in a discovery project to just start looking at system duplication and to start thinking about what the variety of different processes are engaged in the admission practices, even amongst our two offices. That's an early days discovery that we really want to make sure we spend some thoughtful time on. Ideally, we know it would be great for this campus if we have one admission system that can serve the needs that are in graduate studies, as well as the needs that are in undergraduate studies, and look at how we would do that in a thoughtful way. So that's early days discovery, and a process mapping is well under the purview of that discovery process. We're also in conversations about things like fees and fees assessments and things of that nature, just to see if there are places where, again, we can build capacity for FGSR by migrating services to the RO. And in cases where we really need to make sure that the services stay whole within FGSR, we are going to identify those and make sure that that is mapped in such a way that it can be done really efficiently through FGSR. And so we are taking a look at a whole bunch of different areas and trying to focus on what the student experience will be like, and also the staff experience of providing those services to make them as effective as possible. So discovery process mapping, and service inventory, I would say, are the three things that we're looking at the moment.
Thanks, Brooke. Anything to add there?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the use of the word duplication, and I think it is important to make the distinction that services provided by the RO and FGSR are serving two different student constituencies. So while we might have admissions labeled for two processes, on the surface they sound the same, they're in fact very different, because the nature of the programs and again the students that are applying to them are very distinct. So it's not an automatic that they're one and the same. So just ensuring that we have clarity that that we're delivering the parallel services in support of different kinds of programs and different students across the university.
Thank you. I've got a question here about the service catalog. So not all current units or specific services are represented in the student services service catalog. What's happening to the units or teams and services that aren't in the student services catalog? And what about their staff? Can I just reach out to the panel? Anyone prepared to weigh in on the student service catalog?
I can speak to that one, Steve, if that would be helpful.
Thanks. Please.
So the rule of thumb is if you don't see it in the student service catalog, chances are no change. So we know that there are many services that go beyond what we've fully identified within the service catalog. What we've tried to do is create a picture that encompasses the majority of services that are offered and recognizing that it's not fully comprehensive. In places where there's an omission, that omission indicates that it is preserved as is. So if you if there's a service that exists in the faculty that is not identified in the catalog, it will be remaining in the faculty. What we've tried to do is create a picture where we have a starting point for conversation on the changes that we need to make and the processes that we want to continue to explore. And we've illuminated places where decisions have already been made about the balance of work. So if it's not there, it's not changing.
Thanks, Melissa. Got a question here. It was stated that students value personal interactions with advisors. I agree with this. I have plenty of students email me personally and send me thank you notes. This type of relationship building is going to be lost if there is a central student service center. Students will be treated as numbers. Can you please speak to this? I'm sorry, Melissa, I think this is another one that maybe I'll lob onto your lap.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this. And then I'd also invite folks that, and Julie, who's engaged more with working in the faculty side of things. But what I will say first and foremost is that no student that comes to the Student Service Center is treated like a number. The advisors that work within the Student Service Center truly value the opportunity to engage with students. And they also recognize the difference in the work that they do to the work that their colleagues do at the program level. And these are both really important things to preserve. The one thing we're trying to achieve is a common sense of experience where all students feel like they are having deep, good interactions where their needs are being met. In some cases, those needs are as simple as I need to access a transcript, I need to make a change in registration, I need to figure out where to go for career information. Other times, they're very involved program-specific questions, at which point the web we're creating, that student service ecosystem, will allow for a smoother handoff between a student who may end up at the Student Service Center first and then need to transition to a faculty or a department. This centralization is not about homogenization. This centralization is about a student experience that's really underpinned by a better and more comprehensive ecosystem that helps a student have an easier time finding their way at the U of A and can really feel supported from that first contact through to graduation, even more than they do now. We've had such amazing pockets of individual interactions between students and fantastic service providers on this campus, and that will continue to be enhanced. What we're going to do now is link up that web just a little bit better, so the way the student finds their path through the university is much more seamless for each of them. So that's really what we're talking about here. It's not about trying to take away those great interactions that happen at the department and faculty level. That's going to still happen around program advising. It's a matter of continuing to have good interactions in central services that are better connected to the work that's happening across the campus and where it's easier for students to understand which kind of service happens where. And also they can always start at the same kind of a front door, which is that Student Service Center.
Thanks. Julie, more to add on that one?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to what Melissa said. And for those of you who don't know, I spent a lot of time in the Faculty of Science Student Service office. And I think that student experience and that student connection is very important to us, as I know it is to many of us. And I think, I don't think the intent of this is to lose any of that. I think students, if they feel comfortable with an advisor, whoever that advisor is, wherever they wherever they happen to reside, that relationship will continue. And hopefully strengthen. And I don't know about others, but I do remember days in the Faculty of Science email box where there might be 600 or 700 emails and you can't get to them. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to figure out what of those questions could have actually moved to a student service center as that first point, and students know that's where they can go and those questions can kind of be moved through quickly. So advisors in units or academic units have an opportunity to continue those conversations with individual students that maybe need a bit more of that attention. So I think the idea is, ideal state, we can do both. We can have those individual relationships with students and advisors, and those students who just need to have answers quickly answered to move on, actually have a way to do that, and a way to do it maybe a little quicker than we've been able to do in the past. So I think that would kind of move towards what we would like for our ideal state.
Thanks for the answers. Let's go to Denise.
Hi, actually, I'm just kind of piggybacking off of Melissa and Julie, sorry. Hi.
Go ahead.
The one thing that I've heard of recently too is the idea of what's coming with looking for a, lack of better words here, an OTRS replacement system that's going to combine all faculties and Student Service Center, all of it into one, so that we have one centralized student file location where we can have notes and build the relationships within there. As an ex-frontline and just upstairs of frontline now, and I love going downstairs and actually talking with humans again and seeing the students. We do that a lot, and I think the RO and Student Service Center, Student Connect, counter, as it used to call it a long time ago, that was always a goal for us too. We wanted to be face-to-face with students and interact and help. I can't answer a question about your degree requirements and what you're going to do to earn it, but I can get you a transcript, I can get you a cert, I can answer your question on your tax form, things that are standard for all. So I just want to shout out to the RO right now that we do a good job of having that communication with our students. It's just different. And so if we can amalgamate and have one centralized place to have the notes and have the interactions and have the handoff that we all would appreciate as customers as well, all for it. There's my 2 cents. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. Those are very valuable 2 cents. And I think it really speaks to one of the key objectives here is to have an institutional approach to managing these so that people don't fall through the cracks, so that there's a consistent way to track and ensure that people get the answers that they're looking for, and that there's a single system that the entire university uses in order to achieve this, rather than have incompatible and completely different approaches across each of the different faculties or units that can arise under our current system. Any other questions from the Zoom room? Okay, seeing none, let me perhaps go to another question that was on the forum. I've got a question here. Can you please share the survey that was sent to students? It would be valuable to see the questions and responses. I'm going to speculate that it isn't quite so simple as here's a survey, but and rather is a series of more interactive dialogues. But let me test my assumption and go back out to Melissa's and others who've been involved in this process might be able to shed a little bit more light on some of the consultation processes.
Yes, Steve, happy to provide a little bit more information. We engaged in a series of either direct interview style or in roundtables to have those interpersonal connections. There were questions that we asked of students and stakeholders when we were doing consultation, but it was more in line with sort of a focus group approach as opposed to a survey. There was a survey done, though, that then augmented from that. And there is a bunch of resources that we could provide. I believe there was already an aggregate done up of those findings from the survey that we engaged in with students. And Rob, I believe we have that roll up that we've shared before. I seem to recall that it did go out at some point with the student service information and update, but I know we have those aggregate data points that we could potentially share out.
Yes, Melissa, I believe you're correct that we have shared that information, but we will, because of course the question got answered here again, we can make sure that it becomes part of the wrap up for this event, that information is available.
Thanks both for those answers. Another one here from the forum. Many graduate chairs and coordinators have repeatedly argued that it is very important that advising and administration of course-based and thesis-based graduate programs have adequate support, i.e. associate chairs and coordinators at the unit or program level. What is being done to ensure that this happens? The recent plan shows that this firmly and widely asserted position has been ignored. If there is not adequate support, graduate programs and students will suffer as a result. Brooke, maybe I'll ask you to start off, and I'll probably have a few pieces to add as well.
Thanks, Steve. I would say there's a fair bit of detail there that would relate to the Academic Leaders Project, which I'll divert back to you, Steve. But I mean, certainly in terms of wanting to help preserve the local knowledge and support where it's best delivered is something that I think is really important. So how that would actually look going forward, I don't have any details specific to that, because much of that's work and discussions that would happen at the local level. I think that for some of the proposed consolidation of those services that are the same for students over students, program over program across the university, rolling those up, so to speak, does provide opportunity to build capacity at the unit level to really help focus the delivery of that local knowledge. So, but I don't really have any definitive details to offer about what that would look like. I think that there's a lot of work ongoing yet in order to map out tasks that we all do in support of graduate programs, and from that information can make some proposals as to what the rebalancing might look like going forward. But Steve, I'll turn it back to you to address the academic leaders portion of that.
Sure, thanks, Brooke. And the university really is both forced and has an opportunity to look end to end across its systems and really ask itself what is the best way to do a lot of these support functions. And the question here speaks to an example that I would use in talking about the academic leaders overall. So we have some departments, some units that might have as few as, let's say, half a dozen graduate students that graduate coordinator or that associate chair is responsible for looking after. And we have other units where that same associate chair or graduate coordinator position might be looking at 300. And obviously what those academic leaders, those associate chairs, graduate are able to do in those two different circumstances is manifestly different. And what that does is it means that we have highly variable resourcing, we have highly variable service levels. What a graduate student can expect when they're one of 6 versus one of 300 is completely different. And so what we're looking for in a new model is how do we allocate our resources in a way that provides a little bit more consistency of what a student can expect, what a associate chair, graduate, or equivalent kind of position should be expected to do, and really to be able to focus our resources and our thinking around if we have an academic leader, a professor that we're pulling out of the classroom in order to perform one of these roles, How do we ensure that what they are doing is something that really is strategic? It's setting policy, it's setting standards, and it's something that absolutely requires somebody with a PhD and a professor background to do. And so that's a fundamental part of the motivation. Absolutely, we don't want to go to a place where on average the service levels, the experience is degraded. But if we look at that variability across the campus and the challenge that we have in scaling that. So if we were to grow numbers by 25%, how do we do that without degrading an experience by 25%? It really requires us to think differently across the whole end-to-end processes. How do we do these functions in a way that's more scalable, that's more consistent, and is not such that a student in one part of the university has a completely different experience than someone from another part. So this is not simple. As Brooke says, we don't have all the answers yet, but there's a lot of work going on right now in trying to reframe our models for, in this case, graduate student administration in a way that really focuses our discipline expertise where it's needed, and where it's more a generic administration question can be delivered differently in a more scalable manner. So it's a stay tuned answer, but certainly one that we're worried about. We may have time for one more quick question before I have to wrap up. Okay, not seeing any. Todd, I think I'm going to turn this back to you with 2 minutes to spare.
Fantastic. Thanks, Steve, and everyone else. Thank you to all of you for coming out today and sharing your feedback and your thoughtful questions and suggestions. As always, if anyone has questions that weren't answered here today, or if you think of a question post-event, please do submit them to the SET feedback form, which can be found on the UAT website. For those of you that registered for today's event, you will receive an email with the slides. We recorded today's session, so there'll be a recording of the session and a post-event survey. Please do take a minute to complete the survey. We do take your feedback seriously and work to continue to evolve our sessions, both for Ask Said Anything and other similar venues. Stay tuned for the recording and the recap of the event. It'll be added to the UAT website under the Consultation tab. I would like to thank at least some of the people who help make events like this and today's event possible. Big thanks to our panelists, Steve, Melissa, Barbara, Brooke, Helen, Chen, Julie, Rob, and Brian. And sorry to our ASL interpreters, I probably went through those names far too fast. Thank you to Claire and Grant for helping us on the technical side today, and to Carla and Marquesa, hopefully I've gotten that right, for being here with us as our ASL interpreters. Fantastic to have you join us. Thanks as well to many members of the SET team who are working hard behind the scenes and over the past number of weeks just preparing for today's event. Please watch for the FAQ page on the UAT website, as well as Student Services stream page, as we'll be posting answers to the questions that were asked today as soon as they're finalized. And continue to watch that same web page under the Employee Digest and in the quad for further UAT updates. So with that, I will thank you all for joining today. Thanks again to our panelists. Thanks for coming out, and take care. Bye now.